is the Code of Ethics. Now, here's the biggest question I get. Well, does this count towards the 3 hours of continuing education for the Department of Real Estate? No. Okay. This is 2.5 hours of education that you have to have in order to be a member of the National Association of Realtors, the California Association of Realtors, and your local association, Downey. It is in the Business and Professions Code is the one you're referring to, and that says you have to have ethics to renew your license every 4 years. This class is every 2 years, and it's from the National Association of Realtors. There's no test involved here. You just have to be present. If you're not present, and Zoom has a way of telling if you're there or not, agency duties. The biggest problem that we have right now is the fact that we in the state of California have been using an agency disclosure form since 1988. You say, why is that a problem? Well, it's a problem to the people in Missouri because they haven't been doing that. So what we have to do is we have to have some perspective here. The settlement for the National Association of Realtors Code of Ethics, actually it was a settlement over the buyer representation, but we have been disclosing our duties as an agent since 1988. So there's nothing new and exciting in California. Most of the eastern United States, though, works on what we call English common law. Came with the Mayflower in 1600s, landed at Mayflower at the Plymouth Rock, and they brought English common law. The problem with English common law is you cannot represent both buyer and seller. English common law. They use a two-party debt instrument called a mortgage, mortgagee, mortgagor. And the community property laws are considerably different than the ones on the laws that we use in California. In California, we are under Spanish law. That came from the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in 1848. As a matter of fact, we've been using Spanish law since 1848. And in Spanish law, it says you can represent both buyer and seller. We use a three-party debt instrument called a deed of trust, trustee, trustor, beneficiary. And our community property laws are considerably different than those east. So when this decision came up about the agency duties that we have here in California, I was like, we've already been doing this. First of all, we can do dual agency since 1848 in the state of California. Secondly, we've had a disclosure as to what our duties are since 1988. So there's some confusion here, and I want to make sure that you understand. We've written forms that BRBC, as a matter of fact, my office policy at MJC Realty is you will use the BRBC form in all transactions. It's been that way since 1996. Well, let me ask you this. How many of you have ever taken a buyer, showed them everything in the multiple listing, and they bought through somebody else? You all been in the business more than 15 minutes? Well, after that happened a number of times, I said, you know what? The next time somebody wants to pick my brain and waste my hand, I'm going to charge them, just like any other professional would. You see, we're defined as professionals under our state constitution. Yeah, believe it or not, we have a constitution here in California. It was codified in 1879. It says if you have a state-issued license, that's the Department of Real Estate, and a requirement of continuing education, that's 45 hours every 4 years, you are considered a professional. As professionals, we're held to a higher standard. Well, I want to be compensated at a higher standard. So when somebody comes in my office and says, I want to buy real estate, I say, sign a buyer representation agreement. So we've been doing this for many years. It's nothing new to MJC Realty, but it's new to most of the residential aspect of it. So I want to make sure that you understand they do business differently in English common law in the eastern United States than they do in the western because we're under Spanish law here. So we've been doing this agency disclosure all along. What I want you to be cognizant of is the fact that we have an agreement that we have to use that is mandated by the state of California. It's under 2079 of the Civil Code. And 2079 of the Civil Code says, if you do not follow the 3 steps properly, disclose, elect, and confirm, you're in violation of the Code of Ethics, and you're not entitled to a commission. This is the state of California. Now, the state of California has their own code of ethics. You have to take a 3-hour class on that. But our code of ethics is a little bit different. The code of ethics from the Department of Real Estate says you're a bad agent if you do this. You're a bad agent if you do that. That's under 10176, 10177. Our code of ethics say these are the things you should do to be a good agent. So those are the things we're going to cover. But first, I want to make sure that we're clear on the agency disclosure. So let's go to here, and we'll go to, this is the agency disclosure form. This is required by law on the sale of all real property in the state of California. And it talks about your ethical duties on the back here. Nobody ever reads the back in little tiny print that nobody ever reads. You have an ethical duty. This is a civil code 2079. It says you must give this to the buyer and seller at a specific time. You must then identify how you're going to represent them, whether it's going to be the buyer exclusively, seller exclusively, or both buyer and seller. And then you must confirm it by signing the contract. So it tells you what to do on the first page of the contract and what to do on the last page. And it says if you do not follow these 3 steps properly, you're not entitled to a commission. So what I want to do is I want to make sure as real estate professionals that we understand this 3-step process. If you mess this up, not only are you in violation of real estate law, you're in violation of the Code of Ethics from the National Association of Realtors, okay? So this is a disclosure. A disclosure is typically required by law. You say, Joel, I've been using this form for years. I know what it says. If I represent the seller, I have a fiduciary duty to the seller. If I represent the buyer, I got a fiduciary duty to the buyer. Big deal. Here's where they're coming at us. That's not where they're coming at. They're not suing us for that. They're suing us for this. To both buyer and seller. To both buyer and seller. The first one, it says diligent exercise of reasonable skill and care in the performance of your duties. Diligent exercise of reasonable skill and care in the performance of your duties. As a real estate professional in the state of California, and as a member of the National Association of Realtors, you need to be knowledgeable in the area in which you deal. That means not only do you have to know the forms, residential forms, if you're doing residential, but also what the cities and counties require. Some cities require that you have an inspection done. You need to determine that information by calling them or going on their website so that you can talk to your buyers and sellers. If they list and sell their home, if they buy a home, what are the rules and regulations for that particular city? You need to be knowledgeable in the area in which you deal. So the first step is you give them this form. The second step is you then check off boxes on the first page of the purchase agreement. And that first page looks like this. It has similar boxes to this. And it really doesn't matter which box you check off. It just says, if you look at the little tiny print here, you must check boxes. Okay. Whenever your broker says your broker's right, let me give you my 3 caveats. I always have 3 caveats whenever I do a class. Number 1, I'm going to talk to you about 1 to 4 residential units and the laws that are ancillary to those. 1 to 4. That's all I'm talking about. Number 2, I will tell you what those laws are and how they correlate with our Code of Ethics from the National Association of Realtors. But the third caveat is the most important, and that is it doesn't matter what I say here. It matters what your broker says, because your broker's ultimately liable for what you do under 10131 of the Business and Professions Code. So first thing is you give them this agency disclosure form. That's law. It's also part of your Code of Ethics when we get into Article 1 of the Code of Ethics. The second step is you then check off boxes on the first page of your purchase agreement as to who you represent. The last thing is you sign the purchase agreement. If you look right above your signature on the purchase agreement, that's on page 17. It used to be 16 pages last week. It's now 17 pages. The purchase agreement, residential purchase agreement. On page 17, you sign it. When you sign it, it says right above your signature, you're not a party to the contract. It even says it on the first page. If you look at paragraph 1E, it says, You are not a party to the contract. Well, then my question is, why am I signing the dadgum thing? Ethically, you're signing it because you're confirming your agency relationship. This is a 3-step process. You give them this form at a specific time. Do you know when you're supposed to give it to them? It says right here on the form. It says the law requires each agent, that's you, with whom you have more than a casual relationship, whatever that is, to present you with this disclosure form. You're to give them this at a specific time. You start talking to the buyer about buying real estate, you give them a copy of it. You start talking to the seller about listing property, you give them a copy of it. It's the first thing out the door. The next thing is you then check off the boxes on the first page of the purchase agreement, which talks about, do you represent the buyer exclusively, seller exclusively, or both buyer and seller? And you need to talk to your broker about that, because ethically, your broker is liable for whatever you do under 101.3.1 of the Business and Professions Code. So they check off the boxes in this instance, in this instance, in this instance. And then you sign the contract. The only reason you sign the purchase contract is because you're confirming your agency relationship. Do you represent the buyer exclusively, the seller exclusively, or both buyer and seller? That's the only reason you sign the contract. So now when we look at the Code of Ethics, if we go back here to our Code of Ethics, we now know that if in fact you violate 101.76 or 101.77 of the Business and Professions Code from the Department of Real Estate, we're not going to hear it at the Grievance Committee or Pro Standards Committee. They're not going to have a Grievance Committee or Pro Standards Committee hearing. That's going to go directly to the Department of Real Estate. You violated law. You can be disciplined for any violation with the Department of Real Estate. That means revocation of your license, suspension of your license, or you'd be fined. So the commissioner also has some regulations. We have a new commissioner here. We had Commissioner McCauley. He resigned, and we have a new commissioner for the Department of Real Estate. I haven't had a chance to talk to her yet, but I'm hoping to do so at the Reimagine convention. It'll be in Long Beach. So if you come on down there, I'll be at the Realtors Commercial Alliance booth. Happy to talk to you, discuss any of the items you have. I'll be down there on a booth helping out my Association of Realtors. You might have your own booth for down here. So now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the National Association of Realtors Code of Ethics. These Code of Ethics are broken up into 3 areas. They have the purpose of the Code of Ethics, and then Articles 1 through 9 are duties to your clients and customers. Articles 10 through 14 are duties to the public. And the last 3 duties are duties to other realtors. And then we always forget about, well, we don't have to worry about other realtors. Yes, you do. You got to worry about other realtors. Because if you don't, you're in violation of the Code of Ethics from the National Association of Realtors. And that's what we're talking about today. So first thing is, we're going to discuss some key points in there. And those key points are going to involve what's the difference between arbitration and ethics complaints, what kind of forms you use, the difference between an arbitration and an ethics complaint, and how you file it. So what's the difference between the complaints, and then how do you file them? And then the process, if it's an ethics violation, we're going to go through that. And then the process for what you do if there's a arbitration. And then we're going to talk about some of the items in the hearing. What's the process of the hearing to make sure that you understand the process. Now, I want to let you in on something. Y'all going to stick around for the 2.5 hours. You have to in order to get the credit. If in fact you're here at, let's see, 2:30, 3:30, 4 o'clock, 4 o'clock, I'm going to show you something. In the old days, I would say would knock your socks off. That's an old colloquialism. Nobody knows what that means. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to bring it to present day. I'm going to strap you to the nose cone of SpaceX, and I'm going to blast you into space. Okay. Elon Musk's space exploration. Okay, good. So what I want you to know is the kind of punishments that can be dispensed. So if we talk about the code of ethics, in your code of ethics, Article 14 talks about if you violate the code of ethics, the Board or Association bylaws or the MLS bylaws, you're going to go through a process. And that process starts out with the grievance committee. The grievance committee is a group of volunteers. There are three standing committees, okay? The first committee is the grievance committee. Grievance committee, they get a copy of what's called the E1. So if somebody has violated the code of ethics, the board or association bylaws, we have mostly associations, but there are a few board of realtors here in California, or the MLS bylaws, then you're going to go before they're going to fill out what's called an E1. So you go to the association, you say, I think this person violated. I'm going to go to the association. Go to your association, you get what's called an E1. You fill out the E1. You put down what violation, which code of the 17 articles in the Code of Ethics and the standards of practice, and or if it is a violation of the board bylaws or the MLS bylaws, what exactly happened. You say, well, where do I get those? When you join the association, you went through orientation, and in the orientation, they gave you copies of those, or at least links to them. You probably need to go there and look at them again. Now, I got enough stuff to do in my life without having to go and look at code of ethics and things like that. However, if you get called before one of these committees, you're going to wish you had looked at some of those and had some feeling for what kinds of violations could be out there. Because they change. The board or association bylaws change and the MLS bylaws change. Have we seen some changes in the MLS? Yeah, with this decision. So you need to be knowledgeable in the area in which you deal. So here's what happens. They fill out the E1, they give it back to their executive officer, or your pro standards personnel calls the second committee. The first committee, which is the grievance committee. Now, these are volunteers. And I joined the grievance committee because I made a complaint against somebody I thought was a violation of the code of ethics. And I was informed it ain't a violation of the code of ethics. Okay. It was, I got a call from the guy. He said, the head of the grievance committee said, this is not a violation. He said, Joel, you need to learn your code of ethics, your board or association bylaws, and your MLS bylaws. I said, well, how do I do that? He said, you join the grievance committee. In the grievance committee, we would meet once a month and we would go through the code of ethics. We would go through the board or association bylaws. And I learned as a real estate broker what I'm supposed to be doing for the code of ethics and how to make sure I educate my licensees under my license as to what they should and should not be doing. So here's what happens, kind of punishment that can be dispensed. You filled out the E1, you gave it to the grievance committee, you gave it to your association. Association calls the first committee, all volunteers. They meet out there, probably meet in the other building over there in the trading room. And they have the chair, and the chair says, we have a complaint. We have Realtor A and Realtor B. Complainant responded. Is anybody related by blood or marriage to either of these two? So we're all volunteers. We're sitting in this room. If you say, yeah, I'm in the same office, you can't serve on a panel, you're dismissed. If you're related by blood or marriage, you're dismissed. Who's ever left over, we're going to pick an odd number other than 1. Typically, that's 3. It could be 5 or 6. It's typically 3. That's what we call them, a tribunal. The 3 of us get together, we sit down and we look at the E1. And we say, if what Realtor A wrote is true, yes, it is a violation of the Code of Ethics, the 17 articles in the Code of Ethics and the standards of practice, or it's a violation of your board or association bylaws, or it's a violation of the MLS bylaws. If we determine it's a violation, our job is done. We give that back to the executive officer or your staff there at Downey. They then call the second committee. The second committee is the Pro Standards Committee. Now, you have to have training to be on these committees. You have to go through it's all-day training. 4 of these to sit on these particular committees so that you can learn about different forms that have to be used and procedures and things like that. So they all meet in the room again. The grievance committee is done. They left. Different committee. They meet at the room. They look over the recommendation by the grievance committee. Remember, they sat down and they said, if what Realtor A wrote is true, it is a violation. They sit down, they look at it, they go, okay, is anybody, we got a room full of volunteers. These are all volunteers. Is anybody related by blood or marriage to either Realtor A or Realtor B? Oh, you are, you're dismissed. Is anybody related in the same office as Realtor A, Realtor B? Okay, you're dismissed. Who's ever left over, we pick an odd number other than 1. So we pick 3 of us. The grievance committee has already said, if what Realtor A says is true, it is a violation. And now goes to the next committee, professional standards. Professional standards picks 3, contact the complainant, contact the respondent, Realtor A, Realtor B, say, bring your evidence, bring your witnesses, bring anything you think will help you make your case. They then probably would meet at that room in the other building, the trading room, and they would listen. The 3 of us sit up there and we listen. We make notes as we go along because we need something called a finding of facts in order to verify what we recommend as a punishment if they're guilty. So we say, they say, well, here's the reason I think they violated. And they say, no, I didn't. Here's my reason. And they go back and forth, back and forth. Now, we, the tribunal, can ask questions for clarity, but we can't ask a question that'll make the case for them, okay? So we make notes. Every time there's a fact, we make a finding of facts note. When they're all done, we say, all done. Anything else? Okay, you're dismissed. The 3 of us sit down, we go over the testimony we heard on the Professional Standards Committee, the evidence that was presented, and we come up with a recommendation. And here's what that recommendation could be. Remember, we've had the grievance committee. They said, yeah, if it's true, that's a violation. It went to the Pro Standards Committee. Volunteers, you volunteer. And the reason I volunteer my time to be on these committees because I know if I do not volunteer my time, the government will volunteer their time. Now, I don't know about you, but I have enough government in my life. I'm just glad I don't get all the government I pay for. So I volunteer for these committees. Now, the first time I got on the grievance committee, it was because I didn't know the code of ethics. And so I said, good, I'm going to join the grievance committee and I'll be judge, jury, and executioner. And then they said, oh, okay, fine. If what Realtor A wrote is true, it is a violation. And they said, goes to the Pro Standards. I said, well, wait a minute. I want to be judge, jury, and executioner. How do we get to hear this the testimony? They said, you have to join professional standards. So I joined the professional standards. I went through the training and I sat on my first professional standards case. So we sit there, we listen, we write notes. We then make a recommendation. And that recommendation goes to the only group of people in your association that can carry out justice. And that is your board of directors. Your board of directors are your elected officials. They are where the proverbial buck stops. And they can do anything. They can say, good job, committee. We'll go with your recommendation. They can say, Pro Standards, what a lousy job. Go back and do it again. They can say, well, you did okay, but we want to make a few changes. So if in fact you're go before the Pro Standards and the Pro Standard says, yes, you're in violation, they make a recommendation. Now, here's what they can recommend. And this is the kind of punishment that can be dispensed. Number 1, if you violate the code of ethics, they could recommend that you take a class like this in ethics. Maybe some of you are here because you have to be. Or they could fine you. And the fine could be as much as $15,000. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't want to hear about any $15,000 fine. So I take understanding the code of ethics, the standards of practice, and the 3 committees and their duties seriously. Because not only could that happen, but if you violate the code of the board or association bylaws, you could be kicked out of the board or association. You could be kicked out for a week, a month, a year, whatever. If you violate the MLS bylaws, you could be kicked out of the MLS for a week, a month, a year, whatever. Again, if I'm kicked out of the MLS, I'm basically out of business. So you need to be knowledgeable in the area in which you're dealing. And part of that is understanding the code of ethics, the 17 articles in the code of ethics, the standards of practice that are under a lot of them, and then the 3 standing committees. So the first 2 are the grievance committee. Grievance committee, they look at the letter, they say if what they wrote is true, we don't determine, that's going to be determined in pro standards, then it is a violation. It goes to pro standards, different group of volunteers. They then say, yes, there's a violation, and here's our recommendation. They give that recommendation to your board of directors. Your board of directors can do anything. You say, well, I never voted. Well, then be quiet and take your beating. You had an opportunity to vote for your board of directors, you didn't take it. When I was 18 years of age, in the United States of America, you could not vote. The next year, when I turned 19, they passed in our Constitution of the United States that you could vote at the age of 18. And I have voted every year in all elections based on the fact that I've been in 40 different countries in the world. And I know beyond a shadow of a doubt, this is the greatest country. Some of the countries I went to, you want to vote? You vote at the end of an AK-47. So if you don't take advantage of your ability to vote, that's on you. You have nothing to say about the process. So I always call my board of directors and my associate. I belong to 4 associations: Newport Beach Association of Realtors, PAC West Association, Pacific West Association of Realtors, the Orange County Realtors, and the Realtors Commercial Alliance. I want to make sure who those board of directors are and that they have my best interests in mind. So I always call and I'm asking them questions. Okay, if you vote, you want to make sure that you're finding out who you're voting for. The board of directors, here's they can dispense, they can kick you out, they can fine you, they can make you take a class on this. Now, I told you, I wanted to be judge, jury, and executioner. When I was 28 years old, I joined the grievance committee. I then went to the professional standards committee because I thought that's where it was. And then I found out, no, that decision is made by your board of directors. So I ran for board of directors. Now, in those days, you had to be nominated, or I read the bylaws. You could get 400 signatures. If you could get 400 signatures from members, you could run for board of directors. So I went out and I got 400 signatures because nobody would nominate me. I was too young. I ran for board of directors and I won. Everybody said, well, how did you win? I was the only guy out there talking to people. I was going to office to get these signatures. So we're sitting at our first meeting. Pro Standards has come up and said, here's our recommendation. President of the association at that time, his name was Tex Griffith, said, all those in favor say aye. I said, well, wait a minute. Mr. President, I want to be judge, jury, and executioner. I don't even know what happened. He said, Joel, do you understand the Constitution of the United States of America? I said, I hope so. He said it's broken up into 3 areas: the judicial branch, the executive branch, and the legislative branch. And the reason for that is so that you cannot be judge, jury, and executioner. That was a big lesson way back then. And I brought it forth with me. I serve on these committees because I want the best. I want to help professionalize my industry. Also in here, the process for arbitration, very similar. You go down to the associate. Okay, let's run the scenario. Realtor A says Realtor B owes him money. I showed the property and you owe me money. I don't owe you a dime. Okay. They go to arbitration. It's always about money for arbitration. The first thing you have to do is you have to go down and get an A1. It's just a form called an A1. You have to fill out, here's what happened. It goes before the grievance committee. Grievance committee says, if it's not frivolous, we'll send it on to the arbitration committee. Again, this is just a voluntary committee. And when I first joined the arbitration committee, what was interesting is when we got our training, they talked to us about the procuring cause chart. Now, what I want to do is I want to show you this procuring cost chart because I believe it is instrumental. Let me go here, do a new share. The procuring cost chart. So I came down here to, let's go to, procuring cause, pro standards, procuring cause guidelines. So here are the procuring cause guidelines. Okay, now these were the guidelines. Let me make this a little bigger here. That you study as procuring cause. So I'm looking at these guidelines here, and there was this chart. And on the chart, it said, here's how we determined who gets paid. Now, this is the arbitration committee. It says for the intro broker and for the closing broker. So there's three of us, it's always a tribunal, unless you want more than that, but I haven't ever had an association. Orange County Association of Realtors is the largest association in California, 16,000 members, and they still have three, okay, on their tribunal, on their grievance committee, pro standards committee, arbitration committee. It's just too cumbersome to have more than that. So those three would look at this procuring cost chart and determine, did what you did, Realtor A, entitle you to a commission? Or does it go to Realtor B, or do we going to split it? Here's what I found out. When I came down to the last item here, number 23, it says right here, number 23, did the closing broker have a buyer representation agreement? A buyer representation broker compensation agreement. Now, if the answer to that was yes, then you're going to get a commission. If you didn't get a agency disclosure signed, remember the agency disclosure I told you about? That was the first thing we talked about in class. You're already in violation of real estate law. We're not hearing this anymore. It's going to the Department of Real Estate. But if you gave them an agency disclosure and then you'd given them a buyer representation broker compensation agreement, then you are entitled to a commission and you're going to get paid. So right away, I'm sitting here and I'm doing the pro standards and I look at arbitration, I say, wow. So if I as the agent, follow those procuring cause guidelines, and they're on CAR's website. If I follow those, I will get paid a commission as long as I give them the agency disclosure form, disclose, elect, and confirm. So when we're talking about the three standing committees, arbitration committee, they want to know, did you give them the buyer representation broker compensation agreement? If you didn't, you're in violation of the settlement. It's not law here in California. It's in violation of the settlement. You can be kicked out of the association. Well, I don't want to be kicked out of the association. So if you disagree with the award, you can have a portion of it reheard. You can't have the whole, it's not like, well, I disagree with this, so I want it all reheard. What happens there is they're going to say, what little portion do you think you didn't get what's called due process? You say this portion right here, they can rehear that portion, but that's it if you disagree with it. And is it private? Yes. If you serve on a committee and you hear stuff, you're not allowed to talk about that with anybody else except with who's on your tribunal. You're not allowed to go back to your office and say, man, you're not going to believe the one I heard, Realtor X over here, he did. That's a violation of the Code of Ethics. It's also a violation of your board and association bylaws. Okay. So with that in mind, we talk about mediation. Now, mediation is a voluntary process. This has come up quite a bit. It is in your purchase agreement. It's in your listing agreements. If you list the house for sale, if you list the buyer, you take a listing on the buyer, you have a mediation process in there. It's voluntary. And what it does is, as a certified mediator, I sit down with the buyer, the seller, or the other agent. Sometimes I have agents involved, and I find out what happened. And there was about 90% of the time, it's a communication. Somebody messed up and they didn't hear it right. And it can be taken care of in mediation. So rather than go to litigation or arbitration, which is costly, you can do mediation, which is less costly. And 90% of the time, well, I'm not going to say 90, I'll say 80% of the time, I can fix it. Just because somebody said something, they misheard what it was. If in fact you go to mediation, it's different from arbitration in that mediation is not binding. It is a voluntary settlement. Arbitration is binding in your purchase agreement, in your residential listing agreement, in your BRBC, it talks about mediation. If you want arbitration, you might have to add that on the BRBC, the ARB form. If you go to arbitration at the association, it is enforceable in a court of law. When you go to arbitration, that is determinative. In other words, I go to arbitration, I lose. I go, I'm going to go to court. So we go to court. The first thing the judge is going to say is, wait a minute, this has an arbitration clause in it. Did they arbitrate? Yes, they did. What did the arbiter found? They found for the complainant. Court holds same, case dismissed. It'll be that fast because arbitration is binding. Mediation is just an agreement. So remember, prohibited conduct found in the Department of Real Estate is a violation of the Business and Professions Code. It could also be a violation of NAR Code of Ethics. And we're going to find out when we go through the 17, we're going through the 17, that there might be situations in there where we violated that. And as a realtor, you're going to follow the Code of Ethics and you commit to any of these acts or misrepresentations or false promises, we're not going to hear them. We're going to report you to the Department of Real Estate. And the Department of Real Estate is going to come by and say, hi, it was nice to see you. Thank you for being here. We're going to take your license away. All right. So with that in mind, let's go to the National Association of Realtors Code of Ethics. So the way we go to that is we come here. Let's get out of this. We want to go to, oh, here, okay.
Joel,
Yes.
can
Questions?
you wait? Yes. Can you wait one moment? Last time you showed a chart, a lot of people could not see it.
Oh.
So when you put up your
Yeah,
chart,
this chart right here.
yeah, go
This
ahead and
is
put up your
called-
chart.
Yeah, this is called the
Recurring
this is
cost.
called the procuring cause chart.
Okay, can everyone see it? If you cannot see it, will you please throw something? Okay, it looks like we're okay this time around. No one's really saying
Procuring
anything.
cause
Okay.
chart. These are procuring cause guidelines. And this is what I use as if I'm on the arbitration committee to determine how you're going to get paid. I looked at these 21 items and I said, I'm going to make this part of my policy and procedures manual. If this is what I have to do to get paid, then I want to make sure I get paid. So that's why I wanted to show you that. And I'll show you where you can find that at the, on the CAR website. It'll actually take you to NAR, but we're going to go to the CAR website. So let me go ahead and get this going. So we're at go to the California Association of Realtors website. We have to sign in. Do we have enough usernames and passwords? You need some extras? I got extras. Okay. So we come to the California Association. Now we're going to go over the Code of Ethics. The 17 articles in the Code of Ethics. We've gone over the 3 standing committees and what you have to do as a board of director. Now we're going to talk about the 17 articles in the Code of Ethics. And from here, here's what it's in here someplace. I can never find it. Here's what I do know. If I go to the person sitting on a house, I'm at the California Association of Realtors, CAR.org. If I go up here and I go to search and I put in Code of Ethics, Code of Ethics, it will take me to the code of ethics. So I just put in code of ethics. If you put anything in up here, it'll take you to the code of ethics. So it says, okay, you want to go to the code. Here's the National Association of Realtors Code of Ethics. I click on that. You say, oh, okay, fine. I got a copy of these when I joined the association. Yeah. How long ago was that? They change all the time. So you need probably to go back and take a look at them each year. Okay. So you click on the code of ethics. It takes you to the National Association of Realtors. It says, hi, you want to see the code of ethics? Go to where they reside. And they reside at the National Association of Realtors. These are the code of ethics standards of practice. You come down here and you see that as of January 1st, 2024, they've changed. How do you know they changed? Because they're highlighted. Now, I talked to you about duties to clients and customers. That's 1 through 9. Duties to the public, that's 10 through 14, and duties to other realtors, 15, 16, and 17. So now let's go through these and we'll take a break. Let me see, we started at 1:30, so we'll take a break about 2:15. Well, let me see, 2:15, yeah, and then we'll finish at 4 o'clock. Okay, hold on a minute here. Let me change something. Okay. So, Article 1. Now, here's what's interesting to me. It starts out with what we call the preamble. The preamble says, under all is the land. Upon its wise utilization and widely allocated ownership depends the survival and growth of the free institutions of our civilization. Let me make sure that I'm clear on the ownership of real property in the United States of America. Remember, this is the 50, we're talking about the 50 states now. This is the code of ethics for the National Association of Realtors. The National Association of Realtors. Do you have to be a citizen of the United States of America in order to own real property? No. Do you have to have a green card in order to own real property in the United States? No. Do you have to have a social security number? No. Do you have to be 18 years of age or older in order to own real property in the United States? No. That's the Jackie Coogan decision. He was a child star in Hollywood. His parents were stealing all his money. The judge took it, put it in real estate. You can own it. You just can't sell it. So ownership of real property is one of the benefits that I see of being in the United States of America. The first items it talks about here, duties to clients and customers. It basically says you will not lie, cheat, or steal from your clients. Now, I thought that was pretty clear. I will not lie, cheat, or steal from my clients. Apparently, that was so unclear, it took 16 more paragraphs to explain what that means. So you have Article 1, you won't lie, cheat, and steal. And then you have standards of practice 1-1, 1-2, 1-3, all the way to 1-16 as to what that means. Here's what happens. Whenever there is a decision, I'm sitting on the grievance committee, I give it to the pro standards. The pro standards committee says, holy cow, this is a violation. They send that result to the National Association of Realtors. The National Association of Realtors looks at it and says, across the United States, we've had several hearings where this was the decision. Obviously, it's not clear in our articles. So they add what's called a standard of practice. First standard of practice says the duties imposed by encompass all real estate. See, the first one talks about when acting as a principal in a real estate transaction, if you're a realtor, you have to still follow the code of ethics. You can't take off your realtor hat and put on your snake in the grass hat when you're dealing with your real estate. You still are obligated when you buy and sell your own real estate, if you're a realtor, to follow the 17 articles in the Code of Ethics. 2 talks about duties imposed by this encompass all related real estate activity, whether it's conducted by person or electronically. or by mail. So if you're doing electronically, most of our signatures are done electronically now, show them the forms electronically. You must present a true picture in this, and you must be honest and deal fairly. And it talks about all real estate related activities. It says, as used in the Code of Ethics, a client means a person or entities, and a customer means a person or entities. Okay, so here's the definition that I've taken out of this. Okay, let me ask you this. How many of you have ever dealt with a buyer or seller that you wish had never been born? When did you know they were going to be a problem? In the very beginning. You took them on because you said, oh, I know they're going to be a problem. I remember a guy came into my office and said, hey, Joel, I buy property, own property, proper, fine. He said, I like you, Joel. I think I want you to be my agent. The last agent I had to sue them. I said, well, the kind of expertise you have, I don't have. But down the street at Ripoff Realty, they can help you out. I knew immediately that person was going to be a problem. That person, or I'm not going to deal with. Now, if you did deal with them, you didn't know about it, you did deal with them. How many of you have ever dealt with a buyer seller that you wish had never been born? When did you know it was going to be a problem? In the very beginning. So if they're going to be a problem and I'm never going to deal with them again, they are a customer. As far as I'm concerned, they're a customer. I deal with them one time, I'm done with them. What I have put my career on is dealing with clients. A client means you buy a house from me, then you buy another home from me, then you buy another home from me. Then if you want to invest in properties, you come to me for your investments. I take you on for life. That's a client. So whether it's a client or whether it's a customer, these articles still adhere. When attempting, this is standard practice 1-3, to secure a listing, deliberately misleading them as to the value. This is the one I've heard this before where they say, well, wait a minute, you got several realtors that are going to come and give you a property evaluation. Let them all tell you what it's worth and then call me in at the very end and I'll tell you what it's really worth. Okay. So they come in, they do. I come in last, I go, hey, how you doing? Joel Carlson, Ripoff Realty. What did they tell you your property is worth? Oh, they said it's worth that amount? Nah, they don't know what they're talking about. It's worth $100,000 more. Now, where did I get this figure from? I pulled it out of the air. That's not how you get it from a competitive market analysis. Here's what's sold. Here's what's expired. Here's what's currently listed. Someplace in between there, your property probably should sell unless the market's on a nosedive. But in this market, it'll probably sell for more because there's so many people that want real property in Southern California. I've been all over the world, 40 different countries in the world, and I know beyond a shadow of a doubt, this is the greatest area to live in, Southern California, with all its noise and, problems and everything else. And the reason I know that is because in other places I've been in the world, they have big, bad bugs. I was in Florida. There was a bug as big as my fist flying around. I was in Minnesota. The state bird in Minnesota is the mosquito. It's this big. I've seen some things in Africa you don't want to look at, okay? In California, we've got a few flies. You might have an ant, got a couple of spiders. We don't have bugs. We're very fortunate. We're a desert, basically, so that's why we don't have any bugs. But I know this is where everybody wants to live. So the value of real property is going to keep going up. I don't know how it's going to go up, but my first property I sold on Collins in the city of Orange was a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home for $25,000. It recently listed and sold for $785,000. That's a significant increase in value. Standard practice 1-4, when seeking to become a buyer's representative, will not mislead them as to the savings. Oh, hey, listen, if you sign a buyer representation agreement, you don't need to worry about it. The seller pays me. So you're free. No, that's not what the BRBC says. It says, buyer, you're gonna have to pay me a commission. Now, since we're on that, I want to make sure that you're clear. That decision that was made, settlement that was made in Missouri, they didn't realize how we do business here in the state of California. So I want to make sure you're clear on this. Hi, seller. You gonna pay me? No. Okay. Hi, buyer. You gonna pay me? No. Then I'm not gonna do the deal. If you're working for free, let me know. I got plenty of work for you. If you're not working for free, we ain't doing it. There's too much liability in what we do now. Do you know that there's now 48 standard disclosures in the sale of a single family home owner occupied in the state of California? 48. You need to be knowledgeable in the area in which you deal. That's when the guy says he wants to sell it by owner. It's like, you want to what? Are you familiar with the forms, with all the laws, with the disclosures? If you are, if you're not, you're just looking for trouble. You're going to get sued. So here's what I see is going to happen. If we were to go back in time, just 10 years, we go back in the time machine. We're good. Those of you who grew up in the 60s, there was a cartoon show and it was called, and it had a Professor Peabody. He had a time machine, called it the Wayback Machine. So we're going to jump on the Wayback Machine. He used to go and take his students to different times in history and teach them history by them being there. So we're going to go back 10 years in California, just 10 years. 2014, we get off the Wayback Machine, we go into an escrow office. Hi, escrow officer, have you closed a transaction today? Yes, we have. We have the buyer's closing statement and the seller's closing statement. Great. On which one of those, I'm asking you now, on which one of those closing statements 10 years ago was the commission paid from? Buyer's closing statement or seller's closing statement? It was paid from the seller's closing statement. The seller's always paid the commission. Are you ready? Are you sitting down? You got your seatbelt on? Where did the seller get the money to pay me? From the buyer. Nothing's changed. We just have a little form. The buyer gets a loan, the buyer puts a down payment, they give it to the seller pays us. Seller says they're not going to pay us, buyer says, okay, but I'm not going to pay you that price for the property. All of a sudden, seller's going to go, oh, that didn't work. It's just a pass-through. Buyer and even VA and FHA have come out and said the buyer can finance the commission. Now, we don't call them commissions anymore in California. We have to call them compensation. So forgive me, after 40 years in the business, it's been commissions. I will now make it compensation, okay? The buyer's always paid. The buyer got a loan, gave it to the seller paid me. We just didn't realize it. So now we're going to be using what's called at the top of page 2 of the purchase agreement, the RPA. It talks about a form called the Seller Pays Buyer Broker, SPBB. You're going to fill that out. The buyer's going to fill it out because you're not a party to the contract. Remember, we talked about that. Buyer's going to fill it out, send it to the seller. Seller says, okay, fine. Nothing in that settlement with the National Association of Realtors and the Department of Justice said we cannot tell other agents the seller will pay a commission. If you call up, I can say, yes, the seller will pay a commission. If you email me or text me, I can respond back, yes, the seller will pay a commission. You just can't put it in the MLS. And you can't put call me and I'll tell you what the commission is in the MLS. But I could put it on a flyer. I could have a flyer, hand out the flyer, seller pays commissions. And with everything that's going on right now, I'm going to tell you something. It's going to level out. And it's going to go back to the way it was. Because the state of California's elected officials are going to get so many complaints about how complicated this is. They're going to finally say, hold on. This happened in Missouri. This has nothing to do with California based on the fact that we've been using agency disclosure forms since 1988, 1. 2, we're under the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, and we can represent both buyer and seller, whereas they couldn't in Eastern United States. So we're going to see turmoil, and then it'll level out, and it'll go back to the way it was, and we'll just use some new forms, and we're going to get paid. Ain't nobody not getting paid. That makes sense. All right. So 5, it talks about may represent both landlords, both seller and buyer, as long as they have the consent of both. Now, this was in 93. I told you we had an agency disclosure, one of 2 forms given to us by the state legislature. Sacramento put this form together, the agency disclosure, and said you must use this on a sale of all real property in the state of California. It's a disclosure since 1988. In 93, they came up with this one. You shall submit all offers and counteroffers objectively and as quickly as possible. You say, well, wait a minute, isn't that law here in California? Here's what the law says. The law says you must present all offers. It doesn't say anything about objectively or quickly. It just says you must present all offers. So now somebody gives you an offer, you have to present it objectively and quickly. Why? Because you're a realtor. It's part of the code of ethics. You have law here in the state. A lot of the stuff we're talking about here is law in the state of California. Okay, I guess it was 2:45. We'll take our break. Yeah, because we finish at 4, so 2:45. Yeah, so we go about an hour and 15 minutes. Somebody asked about a break. Yep, taking a break in about 10 minutes. Okay, get up, stretch, run around the room, because we started at 1:30, 2:30, 2:15, 3:45, 2:45. Good. All right. So a lot of what we talk about in this class today is already law here in the state of California. Apparently in other states, they don't have these laws because our code of ethics is over the 50 United States, and they've come up with this. Realtors, when acting as a broker, we are good actors and actresses, the listing broker, will continue to submit all offers to the landlord until we're told not to. Wait a minute, let me get this straight. I get an offer, give it to the seller. Seller says, yeah, that's a great offer, I'll take it. We open escrow. We're in escrow for 2 weeks. Another offer comes in. Do I have to present that offer? Yes. The law says you must present all offers. It doesn't say if you're in escrow or anything like that. So you must present all offers. Your code of ethics say you must present all offers as soon as practicable. Well, that's a California word. As soon as practical. Here, when we're dealing with the code of ethics, practicable is in our vernacular for California. So that's legalese. All right. So you must present these offers. Whoa, wait a minute. I'm already in escrow. Seller's happy with the escrow. If we present a new offer and that new offer is a better offer, what's the seller want to do? They want to accept it. I tell them, if you accept that offer, you've already got an offer. If you accept another offer, you're in violation. You got two buyers of that one property. You're in violation of the Kirk law. You're all familiar with the Kirk law, right? In session, 17, Captain James T. Kirk of the USS Enterprise found out he cannot be in 2 places at the same time. You cannot have 2 buyers for the same property. It's a violation of that law. So somebody's got to, so the seller says, well, I'll call up the buyer and tell him to cancel. The buyer says, I'm not canceling. I'm already 2 weeks in. I've already got my loan. I'm ready to close the deal. If you cancel, I'll sue you. Oh, geez. I don't want to hear about this. Now, the law says I must present all offers. Your code of ethics say as soon as practicable or practical. So what I do is I'm the listing agent. I say, seller, we got an offer here. Are you happy with it? Yes. We're in escrow. Yes. If other offers come in, do you want to see them? Yes. Well, wait a minute. If I show you another offer and you want it, you know that you're going to have to cancel that one in order to accept this one, right? Oh, yeah. And if you cancel the buyer's offer, the buyer will probably sue you and put a lis pendens against the property, and you won't sell that property for 2 years. Is that what you want? No, I don't want that. So do you want me to present other offers? No, I'm happy with the offer I have. Good. Then give me something in writing so that when an offer comes in, by law, I must submit it unless you've told me you don't want to see it. That's the law. It's also your code of ethics. It also talks about in here, shall recommend, and the broker stating that an offer has been submitted to the landlord in written notification that it was presented. You say, whoa, 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 what is that? All right, well, we go back here to our forms. We look at our real estate purchase agreement. So we'll go here to the residential real estate purchase agreement. Under the real estate purchase agreement, if we look at this, on page 1 of the purchase agreement, it says the agents are not a party to this agreement. See, it says right here, the brokers and agents are not parties to this agreement. I was talking to you about this earlier. You're not a party. You're not to be telling the buyer and seller what to do. You are to give them options and they make their own decisions. If you are convicted in court as to telling them what to do, you're going to lose your license. You're probably going to get sued. So now we have a situation where I received this, I'm the listing agent. I received this offer. The guy that gave me the offer calls up and says, hey, did the seller accept? I ignore it. Hey, did the seller accept? I ignore it. I, the agent, ignore this agent's questions. They text me, they email me. Right down here on page, oops, you're not seeing this? Yeah, there you are. On page 17 of your purchase agreement. This is page 17 of the purchase agreement. It says right here, article, your code of ethics, presentation of articles pursuant to the National Association of Realtors Standards of Practice 1-7. If the buyer asks for a written request, the seller's agent shall confirm in writing that the offer has been presented. We're in article 1-7 right now. So if another agent says, did you present the offer? And you say, yes, I did. The only way that I know that you can show that you presented the offer is to get the offer was not accepted in the seller's initials. If it was accepted, then everybody's going to be happy and they're going to be celebrating. If it wasn't accepted, you have the seller initial this. Now, if you're trying to sell it yourself and not let other agents know about it, this is how you're going to get caught. Because when you go to the seller and you say, hi, I need you to initial this because I got to give it to the other agent. Seller says, what other agent? Well, the other agent had an offer for $200,000 more than the one you accepted. But I didn't show it to you because I wanted you to accept my offer, so I got both ends of the transaction. That's a violation of your code of ethics. It's also a violation of law. So when that complaint comes in to the Grievance Committee, Pro Standards Committee, we're going to refer it to the Department of Real Estate because you've just violated the law. But it says in here, if I, as an agent, want to see proof that you submitted the offer, you have to give it to me. You, the seller's agent, must give it to me. If you're a realtor, and the only way I know to do that is to give me bottom of page 16 with the seller's initials on it. How do I know that those initials are correct? Because they got initials on every other page. Seller's initialed on every other page here. So that's Articles 1, that stands of practice 1-7. 8 talks about when we are agents, we shall submit all offers and counter offers and show the property. So if we have a buyer representation agreement, we have listed the buyer. We will perform the same functions as if we'd listed the seller. The buyer's paying us, we're going to show them property. We're going to write up offers. We're going to do counter offers. We're going to keep them informed as to what's going on. 1-9, the obligation of realtors to preserve confidential information. You must be respectful of confidential information. As a matter of fact, in California, we have the California Confidentiality Agreement. It's the last form. If we look at our forms here, this is the residential purchase agreement. The last form see, this is a 17-page form. It says 17 pages. This is 27 pages long. The last form is the California Consumer Privacy Act. They sign this and they say they have the right to opt out. And if you put out information and they didn't give you permission, you're in violation of California law, Privacy Act. So even though we're looking at the Code of Ethics, we already have laws that say you can't do this. 9, then 10. Standard practice 1-10. Consistent with the terms and conditions of their real estate licensure, property management, or competent management. Now, with the real estate license here in the state of California, what can we do? We can sell houses, we can sell commercial, we can sell industrial, we can sell raw land. Can we do property management? Yes. Now, if you do property management, you need to make sure of two things in California. Number one, that you got your broker's permission. That's under 10131 of the Business and Professions Code. Number two, that you have a trust fund account. The number one reason agents lose their license in the state of California is trust fund violations. That's under 10145 of the Business and Professions Code. So this code of ethics says you must be mindful of the property management, you're competent, and you will, with the safety and health of the tenants also. So not only do you owe a fiduciary duty to the person who's paying you, but you also must provide safety and health benefits, or, and a healthy situation in the tenants. And this is where we get ourselves in trouble here in California. It's under the Health and Safety Code. If you violated Health and Safety Code, seller, and it has a property management, you're going to be held liable also. 11 talks about employed to maintain or manage some properties. You'll protect it from losses. Okay, fine. You'll make sure they have insurance. 12, 1-12. If you're in a listing contract, you'll tell them what the company policies are. I'm talking about, I'm listing the house. Here's what our company policies are. Here's what we do if we have a buyer representation agreement, if we're going to do dual agency. Okay, any potential for a broker acting as a dual agent. Amended in 2003. We will disclose that fact. We always have. It's law here in the state of California. Remember, what we're dealing with here is the National Association of Realtors Code of Ethics. Some states didn't do this. When entering into a buyer representation agreements, what the policies are, what the amount of compensation will be, potential for additional offsetting compensation from the seller, and any potential representations will be disclosed for dual agency or sub-agency. Now, we don't use sub-agency here in California. That was a court case that happened in the 1970s. It was called the Marin County Association of Realtors. And it basically said, well, the guy sued. He found out that everybody that's in the MLS is also a sub-agent of the seller. The seller was mad at their agent, so they sued all the agents. All the agents had to show up for testimony. They had to do depositions. So California are basically said, we have no sub-agency in California anymore. You either represent the buyer exclusively, the seller exclusively, or both buyer and seller. 14 talks about appraisals. Do we do appraisals? No, not unless you're licensed under the USPAP, Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practices. If you're not licensed under that, what we do is evaluations. We do a competitive market evaluation, a CMA. 15 talks about in response to inquiries, you'll cooperate unless you're told not to. Now, I've never had a seller say, I don't want more money. They always say, yeah, cooperate. Let's get this thing going. Let's get it pumping. Let's get it. 16 talks about 1-16 shall not access, use, or permit or enable any of the information on management that is authorized by the seller. So if the seller has not told you you can do this, you can't do it. Anything the seller says you can do, whether it's on a listing, whether it's on a purchase agreement, whether it's on a property management agreement, you want in writing. State of California, you have 4 elements of all contracts: capable parties, lawful object, mutual consent, and consideration. The 5th element of all contracts in the state of California is it must be in writing to be enforceable in a court of law. Article 2. What we're going to do is we're going to take a little break. We'll come back to Article 2. We're going to get through all 17 articles because I covered most of them in my lecture, but some of them you have to see more succinctly to get the feel for it. Okay, if you do have questions, put them in the Q&A. If you say, Joel, I don't have any questions, I want to ask you the questions, then contact me. Here's my contact information. I'm happy to talk to you about this information. Just go ahead and give me a call. I'm at area code 213-739-8282, and I'm happy to talk to you about all the different things that go on with this code of ethics and anything that we see coming up as far as, the decision that was made by the settlement that was made in Missouri as to how it affects us.
Joel,
Okay?
we got one question.
Sure.
Okay, it's kind of long, so bear with me. Okay, I want to confirm, what if you don't do their accounting? You don't pay any vendors, only do the servicing, collect, and deposit directly into owner's account. Isn't there a form you can fill out if you don't have a trust account and don't do their billing?
Absolutely. If all you are is a conduit, and it talks about this under state law, I take the checks from the tenants and I send them to the owner. No license is required. Well, no, I take that back. They now changed that. You have to have a real estate license just to be a conduit, but you do not have to have a trust account. Okay. Now,
Okay, and
if you take the money and you put it in your own account and then you write them a check out, first of all, you're in violation of 10145 of the Business and Professions Code.
yeah.
Secondly, you're going to be losing your license. Okay, good.
Okay,
So we got
how
a
long is the
10-minute
break
break.
going to be?
The break's going to be for 10 hours. Oh, I mean, 10 minutes.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, wait. Is it worth it to report another agent who interfered with your listing and conned the seller by putting home on the MLS without a listing agreement? Oh, wow.
That's a violation of real estate law. So here we are at the National Association of Realtors Code of Ethics, Article 2. It says you will avoid exaggeration, misrepresentation, concealment. Okay, fine, we got all that. That's a law here in the state of California. You're only obligated to discover acts that adversely affect. All right, now, Easton versus Strasburger says you must disclose anything that would materially affect whether the buyer, seller would sell. You say, whoa, wait a minute, Joel. We're talking about the National Association of Realtors. Exactly. But state law surpasses this. So what you have to do is you have to say, okay, fine. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to do the code of ethics, but if the state law are more restrictive, then I have to go with that. Easton versus Strasburger, 1984 said, you must disclose anything that materially affects whether the buyer, seller would sell. You must disclose anything. Now, the problem that I have is I don't know what's going to affect the buyer and what isn't. So we have a form now called the Statewide Buyer and Seller Advisory. It is 71 items. I use them as a checklist, and I go through those 71 items and I say, does this affect you? Does this affect you? And if they say yes, then I say you should get a report done. Brokers do not have expertise in this area. It's called the buyers, the seller, statewide buyer, SBSA, statewide buyer and seller advisory. It's an advisory, so it's not required by law. But the code says I have to disclose adverse things. State of California says that was a court case in 84 and it was codified then with this. Remember I was talking to you about the 48 standard disclosures in the sale of a single family home, owner occupied in the state of California? If we come back here to the California Association of Realtors website, you always know you're here because somebody's sitting on a house. You might want to write this down because here's where the 48 standard disclosures in the sale of a single family home, owner occupied in the state of California are. Come to the person sitting on the house, you go to Transaction Center, click Transaction Center. Gives you 4 more tabs, come over here to Risk Management. Is risk management a big deal? Click on Risk Management. It says, hi, you want to know what the disclosure charts are? Click here, Disclosure Charts. There are 4 disclosure charts. Now, when I looked at this over 20 years ago, there was 1 chart. It was the sales disclosure chart. We now have 4 charts. REO disclosure chart, that's real estate owned, if you're selling bank-owned property. Lease or rental disclosure chart, that's because we're a tenant state now. New homes disclosure chart, because those of us who build new homes are from different planets. And the sales disclosure chart. This is the one I clicked on almost 20 years ago. This was put together by Member Legal Services, area code 213-739-8282. That's the legal hotline. These are real estate attorneys. Your dues pay their salaries. You say, but I don't have any questions for them. Call them anyway. Make sure it works. When they ask why you're calling, say, Joel told me to. This form was revised February of this year. It is broken up into 4 areas. The first 3 columns are 1 to 4 residential units. If it is a standard sale, these are the disclosures. And these are the ones I counted. I'm a numbers guy. I saw this, I said, are you kidding me? And I counted 48. If you're selling probates, trusts, this is the column. If you're doing foreclosures, this is the column. If you're selling apartments, 5 units or more, if you're selling commercial, industrial, this is the column. You're doing personal property. Here's the actual form and the law. $53 disclosures, of which 48 are required by law. Some of these are not required by law. Some of these are no. You don't have to do them. I just counted the ones in the first column. You need to be knowledgeable in the area in which you deal. So when we're talking about the code of ethics, we want to make sure that in the code of ethics, it says you will disclose anything that would materially affect whether the buyer, seller would sell based on state law, but anything that you think by the National Association of Realtors would affect them. Now, There's a Privacy Act, so you can't tell them stuff they tell you don't tell them. Okay, but I always want that in writing. So now if somebody says, well, you didn't tell us this, I say, oh, the seller told me. You realize that in the state of California, the seller is your employee or employer. They're your boss. It's not an independent contractor agreement. That's with your broker. This is a written contract, and they are your employer. 5 says if defined as non-material, you don't have to worry about it. Well, the problem is it says you must disclose anything in California. I don't know what's non-material, because all the buyer has to say is, had I have known, I wouldn't have purchased. And now you're in trouble. 3, will cooperate with other brokers. Okay, got that one. And it talks about here, any change in compensation offered must be communicated prior to the time that the realtor submits the offer. So this was a game that was being played a couple of years ago, where 2014 is when this came up. You'd call and say, hi, is the property still available? Yes. Pardon me. Well, I have an offer on that property. They say, oh, okay, send it on over. By the time you send it over, the other agent, the listing agent, went online and changed the amount of commission. So that's why when I call up and I say, hi, is this the, yep, I have the phone call that I made to them, and then I print out the listing and I put it in the file. No discussion. 3-5 talks about an obligation of subagency. We don't have subagents. Got rid of that in 1970s. However, 6 talks about shall disclose the existence of accepted offers, including offers that unresolved contingencies that any broker is seeking cooperation. Oh, wait a minute here. If you call up and you ask me if I have other offers, I have to tell you about them? Yeah, it says right here. If in fact, concerning it talks about if you have promptly disclosed, yeah, right here, accepted offers, including offers. Now, where the heck is this? Well, this is in your National Association of Realtors Code of Ethics. Here, if we go to our purchase agreement, we come back here to our purchase agreement.
What?
In our purchase agreement, if we come back here to the purchase agreement, it talks about in our residential purchase agreement, there's a form that's in the bundle of forms. And it talks about right here, possible representation of more than one buyer and seller. This is a disclosure and a consent. And I know if you're trying to ask a question, I'll be done with this just a second here. This was put together by Member Legal Services. Oh, you all know who Member Legal Services is, right? These are the people that write up the purchase agreement. You know, have you ever looked at the purchase agreement and said, who the heck wrote this thing up? This is the residential purchase agreement. Who wrote, not who filled it in, we filled it in. This was not written up by realtors. This was written up by you, agents, who volunteer your time on what's called standard forms. You put together all the 259 forms, you gave them to legal staff at CAR to make sure they're admissible in a court of law. So this is one that was put together by standards of practice, what they call the forms committee. They gave a better definition of multiple buyers because it wasn't in there. They gave a better definition of multiple sellers. This is an update of the first form we talked about, the agency disclosure. And it also gave a better definition of dual agency. All right, now,
Questions?
Realtor A has a listing. Realtor B calls up and says, hey, I got an offer on your listing. Realtor A says, send it on over. Realtor B sends it over to him. My buyer calls me up and says, hey, I want to make an offer on Realtor A's property. I call up Realtor A. Hey, Realtor A, property still available? Yeah. Got any offers? Yeah. What are they? Can Realtor A tell me what Realtor B's offers are? Offers are not necessarily confidential. Buyers advise the seller, the listing agent may disclose the existence of the terms or conditions of the buyer's offer. It's right there. It's signed by the seller.
Yes.
It's signed by the buyer. It's signed by the buyer's agent. It's signed by the seller. There is no excuse for you not to know this other than I have been taught all my life. You can't do that. Changed a couple of years ago, and it's now in our code of ethics. So we had a question?
Yes, a couple, and I hope it too much time didn't pass. Is the seller still your boss if you represent the buyer?
Absolutely. Now you got two bosses.
Unless,
You have a listing agreement
yep,
with the seller, and you have a listing agreement with the buyer. If you represent them both, they're both your bosses. And if you go on your agency disclosure form, it says you have a fiduciary duty to both. That's why most states that do dual agents, they say, I can't do dual agents. They say, how do you do that? How do you represent both? I told them I'm schizophrenic. Otherwise, I
do
don't know
you
how you
think
do it.
dual agency will go away in the near future here in
Uh,
California?
I don't think so. We're making too much money on it. That's part of that's part of my budget. I know a
Okay.
certain number of deals I'll get both the sides of, so I know that's in my budget, and I budget that, so I have enough money to spend on all the insurance and all the fees and costs and everything of running a brokerage. I
Okay,
don't
I'm
think,
not sure at what point, Joel, this question came in, but it says, unless we submit a form not to disclose, correct?
correct, right. Now, so here's what that was. It says on this particular form, you must disclose if somebody says, what's the offer? You have to tell them what the offer is. I'm the agent. I'm listing agent. The buyer calls up and says, hey, I got a guy who wants to know what's your offers. It says here, buyers, if I can tell them. Somebody says, what if the seller tells me not to? What seller in their right mind would say they don't want more money? They always say, yeah, let's bid this puppy up. Let's get it going. It is your buyer that might have a form called the confidentiality agreement that says, no, I don't want you to tell them. But there's a drawback to the confidentiality agreement in that if I put that confidentiality agreement, I say, hi, buyer, you want to make an offer? Yes. You don't want them to talk to anybody about your offer? No. Then we got to use a confidentiality agreement. That means the seller has to sign this before I give them the offer. The seller says, wait a minute, I got 4 of their offers here. They want me to sign this before they show me the offer. Forget this one. I'll look at the 4 I have. So there might be a drawback to asking for that form if you represent the buyer. There is a form. If you wonder, is there a form for that? Yeah. We have over 259 forms in here. I told you about them. I was on standard forms in the 1980s when the purchase agreement went from 2 pages to 4 pages. Here's what I figured out. Every time we lose a major lawsuit, it's good for another paragraph and another form. We have a 17-page purchase agreement that's 27 pages long.
Okay,
It's
Joel,
interesting out there.
couple more questions.
All right.
Okay, if not dual agency and you only represent the buyer, is the seller still your boss?
No, no. Remember, we got rid of that in the 1970s with the Marin County Association of Realtors. You either represent the seller exclusively, the buyer exclusively, or both buyer and seller.
Does E&O insurance go up when you do a dual agency?
I do not know. You'd have to ask an insurance guy about that.
Sure.
I'm not a big fan of errors and omissions insurance, and here's the reason. Errors and omissions cover errors and omissions. When you get sued, ask your errors and omission company. When you get sued, what's the number one thing you get sued for? Fraud. Does errors and omissions cover fraud? No. So you buy an insurance policy that doesn't cover you. I'm not a real big fan of it, insurance.
Okay,
I understand what it's for. It's for errors and omissions. But if you're trained properly and you understand the forms and you go through the classes, there shouldn't be any errors and omissions. Just saying. Okay.
Okay, no more questions.
All right, good. So now we go to 3-7, as it says seeking information from another realtor concerning the property. You will disclose any interest that you may have. In other words, when they call up, I love it when they call me up and they say, hey, is the property available? Yeah. What do I think? I think they're a buyer. You need to say, hi, this is Joel Carlson, ABC Realty. I'm calling on the property you have listed at. Now I know you're an agent. You're not probably the buyer. But if you don't disclose that, you're in violation of real estate, the code of ethics. 9 talks about shall not provide access to the listing materials without the option establishing it with the owner. So I can't say, hi, seller, you want to sell your home for this amount of money? Perfect. Hey, buyer, the seller will sell it for nothing. I can't do that. Whatever the seller tells me, I can print and tell other people about. And I make sure whenever the seller says, oh yeah, I'll take a lower price, I say, fine, let's get a reduction in cost here. Let's get a reduction in the commission price. You say you'll take less, then let's let people know. 11 talks about may not refuse to cooperate on the basis of any of the protected classes. There are 9 protected classes at the federal level: race, color, sex, national origin, religion, familial status, handicap status, sexual orientation, and gender identity. Those are the 9 at the federal level. In the state of California, we have an agency, we have a fair housing disclosure form. The fair housing disclosure form, let's go back here, says this is a fair housing discriminatory advisory. That means it's just a good idea. It's not required by law, but it tells you who the protected classes are in the state of California. I told you at the federal level, it is race, color, sex, national origin, religion, familial status, handicap status, they call it disability here in California, sexual orientation, or gender identity. Those are the 9 at the federal level, what we're talking about today. We're in the state of California. We got 22 protected classes. You need to be knowledgeable in the area in which you deal. Just because there's 9 at the federal doesn't mean you can just use those 9. You must not discriminate against any of these protected classes. The only one I have trouble with is any arbitrary characteristic. I don't know what that is. Article 4, shall not acquire an interest in or buy any property where you are immediate family member or related by blood or marriage. Okay, we got that one. That's law here in the state of California. A realtor shall not undertake to provide professional services concerning the value where they have a contemplated or an existing interest in the party without disclosing that to the parties. Now, when we talk about disclosure in California, we're talking about in writing. If I have an ownership interest in the property and I'm selling it, I must disclose that in writing. If you have an ownership interest in the property and you're selling it to me, I must disclose it in writing that I'm a licensed real estate agent. That's law in the state of California. 6, shall not accept any compensation without the client's knowledge and consent. So now I say, hi, seller, you're going to pay me? Fine. Buyer, give me something on the back end here. Give me a little something here. You have to put it in writing. Everybody has to disclose it, and everybody has to say that they accept it. That's law here in the state of California. It's also in your code of ethics. 7 says, in a transaction shall not accept compensation from more than one party, even if you're allowed to, without disclosing it to all parties. So this is our dual agency. We've had dual agency since 1848, Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, and we've disclosed it since 1988. Most of the United States could not represent both buyer and seller. 8 shall keep a special account in an appropriate financial institution. What the heck is that? Oh, that's my trust account. Okay, in the California law, we're under what's called the 10,000 series. It's the Business and Professions Code 10131 if you're licensed as a broker, 10133 if you're licensed as a salesperson, 10145 is trust fund handling, 10176 and 10177 is all the things you do. You're a bad agent if you do that. You're a bad agent if you do that. So what we're talking about here is 10145 of the Business and Professions Code. It says if you take money and you put it into an account, that account must be a trust account, a designated trust account. You're using clients' money. You can't put it in your personal checking account and then write it out. You have to put it in a trust account. You have to go to the lender and you have to establish, hi, I'm the broker. This is a trust account. I can keep up to $200 of my own money in a 30-day period of time. I cannot use that money, any of the money that's in there, without the permission of the seller. And you have a written agreement what you're to do with the money. Purchase agreement if you have a deposit, property management agreement if you're doing property management. This is the number one reason agents lose their license, state of California. Trust fund handling. And it's not that you steal the money, it's that you don't handle it properly. That's all. That's why I love the RP, the new residential purchase, not new, it's 2010, 15 years old. It says you, buyer, will wire the money to escrow. I don't get it anymore as the agent. Don't give it to me. Don't write a check out to me and give it to me and I give it to escrow. You wire the money. And there's a whole class on wire fraud. As a matter of fact, there's a form on wire fraud. 9 says for the protection of all parties, whenever possible, all agreements will be in an understandable language. What language is that? What is that understandable language? You say English? No. I've been to England. They speak English in England. What we speak is not English. Okay, I'll tell you right now. You say, oh, it's American. All right. North American, Central American, or South American. They're all Americans. So here's what I've determined is that understandable language that we speak. In 1963, Khrushchev, he was the head honcho of the USSR, Russia at that time. He was talking before the UN. He took his shoe off and he beat the podium with his shoe saying, I will bury you Amerikanskis. I think we speak Amerikansky. We're the United States of America. We speak our own language. So with that in mind, it has to be expressed in the terms that the parties will understand. Okay, now, about 15 years ago, the California Association of Realtors decided we're going to put out the purchase agreement in all the different languages. They didn't realize there was over 100 different languages. So they pulled back from that. Your purchase agreement, your agreements are going to be in Amerikansky. If you want to translate or you want to interpret these purchase agreements, listing agreements, buyer representation agreements, you can get a form that's called Translator Interpreter Form. It's a CAR form. And it says you are translating this for this buyer or this seller. And you are obligated and responsible for that translation. If you want to do that in my office, you must have a real estate license. One of my agents speaks 5 languages. She's from Europe. She speaks 5 languages, writes it, everything. All right. She can be an interpreter, a translator. If you say, oh, well, I took Spanish 101 in high school, but I've never used it since then. You ain't going to be an interpreter or translator. Not in my office anyway. 10, duties of the public. Now, these are the 10 through 14 duties of public. You shall not deny based on the 9 protected classes. Don't discriminate. You will not discriminate based on any of those for lease or sale. You will not represent anybody who says discriminate on lease or sale. You will not print or display anything that shows a preference for any of the protected classes. Now, when we're talking about this, there are 9 protected classes here. That's the National Association of Realtors. In the state of California, we have 22 protected classes. So you want to make sure that you're not discriminating. It was amended in January of 2023, and that's why it's in yellow. Remember the first thing I said, if it's in yellow, you'll probably want to reread them. And also talks about 5, must not use hate or harassment speech in anything you're doing. So now I say, you know what? I'm going to go out and I'm going to protest. I'm going to take off my realtor hat and I'm going to put on my protest hat and I'm going to yell and scream about all sorts of things. You're still in violation of your code of ethics. Article 11, it says when standards of practice of competence. This means you need to be knowledgeable in the area in which you deal. My office policy is we do not do property management. Why? Because there's too much liability. And it's hard to get errors and emissions insurance for that anyway. So here we are in a situation. I want to do commercial buildings. I want to sell commercial buildings. you need to be knowledgeable in the area in which you deal. We use different forms. When I sell over a $20 million commercial building, I use AIR forms. CAR has forms called the CPA, the Commercial Purchase Agreement, but it's based on residential. 90% of the membership at NAR and CAR is residential. So we have our own set of forms we use called AIR, American Industrial Realtors forms. Now it's been, the organization is now called AIR CRE, AIR Commercial Real Estate. So you want to make sure that you're knowledgeable in the area in which you're dealing. If you're dealing in land, you have to understand if you're selling property in other places and they have specific things like a septic tank. I sell properties in Newport Beach. I don't know nothing about septic tanks. You need to be knowledgeable in the area in which you're dealing. It says preparing opinion is of value. You be knowledgeable. If you're going to do a competitive market analysis, you better be knowledgeable and familiar with that. If you are going to the code of ethics in respect to other disciplines, if you are a member, if you have passed the appraiser's license, you have an appraiser's license, either a certified license or you're a licensed appraiser, you have a code of ethics. You already have to follow. As well as if you're a realtor, you have another set. And it talks about realtors provide consultative services. No, wait a minute. I'm licensed under 10131 of the Business and Professions Code. I can sell houses and commercial, industrial, raw land. Can I charge you hourly for consulting? Absolutely. It says in our law that you can be paid for your consulting services. So I'm just like an attorney. If you come to me and say, Joel, I don't want to buy anything or listen to anything with you, but I want information, I have you sign an agreement. And that agreement is $495 an hour. My attorney the other day said, Joel, you charge more than I do an hour. I said, yeah, because I put deals together. I don't blow them up. He didn't like that. 12.
No, Joel.
Honest. Yes.
I'm sorry. Before you move on, there's a few questions. Okay.
Good.
Okay. Can you charge fees up front for services?
Yes, those are called advanced fees. And the laws in the state of California, you must take those advanced fees and put them in your trust account. You say, I don't have a trust account. Then you have to get a trust account. When I list a big office building, have you seen that? When you list a house, you can put a little sign on the house. It's about that big. When I list a commercial building like this, I can put a sign on it that you can see from the space station. Why? Because of sign ordinances. But I'm not going to put a specific sign on that property out of my pocket unless I know it's going to sell. If I don't know it's going to sell, I'm going to say to the seller, you want to sell this property? You give me some money up front. I'll buy these things. I'll put them all together. I'll distribute it out. And then when it sells, I will take that and reimburse you out of my commission. Well, it's a little bit different with commercial. Nothing wrong with that. But in order to get that money from the seller, I must have a trust account that's licensed that is delineated under 10145 of the Business and Professions Code.
Okay. If you have a seller who wants to sell to a buyer directly, can they assist in writing the purchase agreement?
Yes. You're still obligated to all of the laws. You still have all the disclosures. You have all of the laws. Especially if you're getting paid. If you're doing it for free, that's one thing. But if you're getting paid, you're obligated to be knowledgeable in the area in which you're dealing. And you better be able to explain the forms, and you're liable. You're under a part of the law called gratuitous agent. The vernacular is in law, you're an ostensible authority. That means you're working for free, but you have all the liability as if you were getting paid. Yeah, you can do that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do it.
Okay. It was asked, who should we reach out to when a listing agent has not disclosed on the MLS that they have interest in the sale of the property? And I answered for you, Joel, and said the local AOR they belong to. So there was a follow-up question that says, will the AOR follow up with you on the report? And if they don't, who should we reach out to then? And it is the obligation for every association with any R, this is what we have to do. We have to follow the code of ethics and make sure that any complaint that is filed goes through the process that Joel has already spoken about. So if you've reached out to an association to complain about someone doing that and you're not getting any resolve, you can then go to that association's executive vice president. They all have one, they're in charge, or the president, who then will go to the executive vice president. But all complaints like that should be heard. It's our
Absolutely.
obligation.
Yep. And
Okay,
here's what happens. And here's the point she's making. If in fact you make a complaint and the grievance committee or pro standards committee says, no, we're not doing that, it's a violation of real estate law. As a member of the grievance committee, I can help that person. I can recuse myself from the committee and I can help that person make a complaint to the Department of Real Estate. Or we can complain as a committee to the Department of Real Estate. If they're violating real estate law, we want to get rid of these people. That's a violation of real estate law. First thing you do is you file it with your association. Association says, oh yeah, we can hear this, fine. Oh no, we can't hear. It's a violation of real estate law. We don't do that. Then they can take some next steps, whatever their office policy and procedures are.
Okay, and can we only charge on commercial and residential?
What else is
guess, I don't know.
there?
Maybe they can re-ask.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah. If you have a real estate license, you can sell all of these different things. You can charge consulting fees on all of them.
Okay, and then the
No.
statute of limitation for a complaint is 180 days.
But yes, if you
Okay.
have, if somebody violates the code of ethics, the board association bylaws, the MLS bylaws, you must file within 180 days. Either an E1 or A1.
Okay, that's all.
Okay, good. So you got to be honest and truthful. I love Article 12, and that it says not only do you have to be honest and truthful, but if you're offering prices, terms, and discounts or other inducements, it's unethical if you say, oh, put this in here. We're going to give you a free trip to Bakersfield for the weekend. Okay. And then you say, oh, I want to give it to this lady over here. She's the one that's made me mad all the time, or she's the one that's going to list the property. It has to be a unbiased. You draw the prizes out, not just saying, okay, put your names in here. Okay, I got all your names and numbers. Thanks you very much. I'm going to contact you and see if you want to buy or sell, but I'm going to give the prize to this person. It's got to be a random drawing. Goes on and it talks about will not advertise nor permit to be advertised any affiliation that's adverse in the real estate services in any medium without disclosure of the name of that firm readily apparent. Okay, wait a minute. If I put a sign out in front of the property, by law, I have to put the broker's DBA on there, or actually what they have on their real estate license, and the license number. If I put out my business card, I must have my DRE license number on there, Department of Real Estate license number. Well, I've got that in mind. Anybody double O's out there? Your license starts with 00? That means you've been doing real estate since the mid 80s back. You got your license before 1986. You've been around. Well, have we seen some stuff? Mine is 005. So you want to make sure that if you're disclosing that anything you do on advertising, you've got to put it. In California, we have what are called teams. We have California law that says you can advertise you're a team. Team Carlson, but I have to put in there MJC Realty in the same size font. And I have to put the DRE license number of the team and the DRE of the leader of the team and the DRE license number of the brokerage. 6, it says when advertising unlisted property. My problem with unlisted property is this. If it's unlisted, how are you going to get paid? I love this when they say, oh, it's off market. Okay, how are you going to get paid? Well, what do you mean? How are you going to earn a commission? Oh, we have a listing agreement with them. Then under clear cooperation, you must put that listing into the MLS within 1 business day. Nothing's changed on that. If you take a listing on a 1 to 4 residential unit or raw land, that's all I'm talking about here today, 1 to 4, you must put it in the MLS within 1 business day. That's clear cooperation. It's in your RLA, residential listing agreement. It's now an addendum to that. Unless the seller tells you not to, okay? That's a whole different can of worms, if you will. But you must. You say, oh, well, they're gonna pay me, they promise they'll pay me. Okay, you give me $10,000, I promise I'll pay you back. If it's not in writing, it's not enforceable in a court of law. If it's in writing, you have to put it. If it's a 20-unit building, 20-unit apartment building, well, that's outside of the purview of what I'm talking about today. But if it's unlisted, I want to make sure you're going to get paid. That's all. All right, good. Now we come on down here to 12-7. It talks about only realtors who participate in the transaction may claim to have sold the property. I get this all the time. I'll get this flyer. This flyer comes in and says, hi, I'm the new realtor in the area. If you're interested in buying and selling or finding out what your property's worth, please contact us. Oh, by the way, here's all the properties that have sold on the MLS within the last 90 days. What's the implication? This agent sold all these properties. If you didn't sell them or you didn't list them and you put out a postcard with that information on there, then you must disclose who did sell and who did list. So I'm a new agent. I want everybody to know I'm a new agent. And so I just take stuff off the MLS and put it in here. No, you're in violation of standards practice 12-7. I don't know about you, but I don't want to hear about that. 8 talks about obligation to present a true picture in your presentations. This is a famous court case that happened in Malibu. There was a guy, he wanted to list and sell his home in Malibu, but there was telephone lines. He wanted the telephone lines removed from the picture. So he told the photographer, Photoshop it so that the telephone lines don't show. An offer came into from somebody. It was a very nice property, very expensive, right on the water. They didn't even look at the property. They just bought it sight unseen. When they came out to go, they went, wait a minute, what are all these telephone lines? These were not in the pictures. The licensee lost their license. The photographer was sued, and everybody in the whole thing was sued based on the fact that you must present a true picture. Not only photographs, but in the verbal information you give out. That includes internet content and images. So not only is it pictures in the MLS, but also if it goes out to the internet, you must present a true picture. And intending to share consumer information, you must be reasonably apparent in a reasonable, apparent manner. In other words, what's your relationship? Are you the listing agent, the buyer's agent? Are you an owner? And 13 talks about shall not engage in any activity that unconstitutes a practice of law. Whoa, wait a minute, what's this? Well, in the state of California, in order to practice law, you must have passed the bar. You have to pass the bar in the state of California in order to practice law here. You don't have to take any law classes. You don't have to have a JD degree. You just have to pass the bar. If you've done that, then you can practice law. Otherwise, 14 talks about unethical
before you move on to 14. What about agents that use virtual staging?
Virtual staging is fine as long as they disclose it. All you have to do is say, this is virtually staged. Their furniture is not real. Okay, you just have to put that someplace on there. Okay, nothing wrong with virtual staging. And a lot of times what they'll do is they'll take the furniture, they'll take a picture and they'll just virtual stage over the existing furniture. And the buyers come walk in and they go, wait a minute, where's all that furniture I saw? No, this is virtually staged. No problem with that, but you have to disclose it. You have to get whose permission? Sellers to do that. 14, unethical practice. You will cooperate with the grievance committee, pro standards committee. Those are the two committees that go into Article 14. And as I told you at the end of class, I'm going to strap you down to the nose cone of SpaceX and I'm going to launch you. You're not going to believe what I'm going to show you at the end of class. Duties to other realtors. Okay, now we get into it. 15, will not knowingly or recklessly make statements about the professionalism of other businesses or realtors. you're not going to say, it basically says you're not going to say bad things about other realtors, okay? It used to say you will not disparage other realtors, but nobody knew what that meant. So now it says you won't say bad things. You will not recklessly false, unfounded ethical complaints. So I'm mad at this agent. They haven't done anything unethical, but I fill out an E1, I send it in. I fill out an E1, I send it in. I fill out an E1. There's nothing to it. The grievance committee has to look at these and say, yes, if what you wrote is true, it's a violation. If you do that and you're wasting our time, you are in violation of the code of ethics. It goes down to 16. Now we're getting to some interesting stuff here. Shall not
Before you
engage.
move on,
Yes.
before you move on, what
Go ahead.
about all the agents who are marketing other listings without the listing consent?
They're in violation of real estate law.
And door knocking using my live active listings without notifying listing agents?
Okay, so I'm knocking doors and I say, hey, you want to list your property? And it's already listed. That's a violation of your code of ethics.
Yes.
It's right on the edge of violation of real estate law. Here's what the law says. You may not interfere with another person's business. That's called restraint of trade. It's under our civil code. So if my business, I have a listing, that's a business, and you knock on the door, hi, Joel, listen, I know you're listed with this guy. He's a bum. Cancel a listing and list with me. That's a violation of your code of ethics. One. Two, it's a violation of law. State of California says you can't do that. Same thing with a buyer representation agreement. This is what I'm talking about right here. If you have a buyer representation agreement, another agent cannot come to them and say, hey, listen, I know you're listed with Joel, or you have a buyer representation broker compensation agreement with Joel, but he's no good. Cancel it and list with me. Let me be your representative. That's a
Okay.
violation of law as well as your code of ethics. It says you're not allowed to do that right here. And it goes on to say it's not intended to prohibit aggressive or innovative businesses. So there's nothing wrong with sending out the postcard. Just make sure that on the back with all those properties, you say this was listed by this company, this was sold by this company, this was. Now, I don't know if you want to advertise for other brokers, but otherwise you can't put that out. And if I say, hi, I'm Joel Carlson, I'm a new agent in the area. I don't put anything on there but just me and a picture of the dog. Okay. I must put a little disclosure down at the bottom saying, if your property is currently listed, or if you have a buyer representation agreement, a current representation agreement, this is not intended as a solicitation. This is a general announcement. Nothing wrong with general announcements.
Okay. Okay, there's someone on this class, Joel, which by the way, you're doing a great job.
Thank you.
That is under the name anonymous attendee. I have asked you 3 times to tell me your name and you have not, and you keep asking questions. Can you please reply to me and tell me what your name is so we can give you credit? If you don't, we can't give you credit.
We can't give you credit.
Okay.
And by the way, based on Zoom laws, they are called a Zoom bomber. You can push them off the Zoom. They have to identify themselves based on the contract that you have with Zoom. If they don't do that, you have the right to say you're gone. So they won't tell you.
Okay.
Just connect them.
And then just does a buyer agent need to present his buyer rep agreement to preview one of my listings?
Okay, so now I'm sitting on open house. I'm ready for open house. I got a donut in one hand, a cup of coffee in the other. I'm ready. A buyer comes walk in and I say, hi, how you doing? They go, hey, I like this house. I think I'd like to make an offer on the house. You go, oh, wait a minute. Hold on. I got to give you a buyer. I got to give you an agency disclosure. That's law. You want to make an offer. My next question is I have to ask you, are you working with any other brokers? Oh, yeah, I'm working with everybody in town. Have you ever signed a buyer representation agreement? It looks like this. I keep a copy with me. It looks like this. Oh, yeah, I've signed one of those. Then I can't talk to you anymore. Yeah, but I want to come in and see the home. Okay, then you have to sign what's called an open house non-agency agreement. We have a form for it. Okay, let me see if I can find the form real quick. It's under here. Okay, if we go to disclosure charts, we go over in disclosure charts, we find the person sitting on the chair. Okay. In here, they used to have a little button that says up here, you can go to these different forms. So we'll go ahead and sign in. And these are great questions. And the reason I love these kind of questions, and it gets me off track, and please forgive me, but this is important for you to know as real estate professionals right now, because if somebody walks into your open house and they will not sign a buyer representation agreement, you have to have an answer. And here's the answer. So you go to search, you go, just type in new forms and revisions. New forms and revisions. This will tell you everything that's gone on since 2017. So here's new forms and revisions. Good. I come down here. You don't want 2017. You want to go to July 24th, or July of 2024. Okay, you click on that and it says, hi, here's all the different forms. Now, I'm a certified forms trainer, and I can't tell you what all those forms are. I have no clue. So what you do is you go to summary guide. You click on summary guide. It will tell you each form and what they're for. So it talks about modification of terms. This is a new form. Modification, new form. This is a new form. And we come down here to open house visitor, non-agency disclosure, and sign in. So if they will not sign a buyer representation agreement, but they want to see the house, we can't stop them, but we can say to them, I want you to fill out this form. Two reasons. Number one, in the homeowner's insurance, if you look at the homeowner's insurance policy for the seller, it says if you're not invited in, you're not covered by insurance. That means if somebody comes in, they won't sign anything, they fall down and get hurt, they're not covered. And it also says you, by the settlement, must get this information. You may either have a buyer representation agreement or a non-agency disclosure sign-in. And the form just says, it's got a whole list of people you can find. They don't want to. I say, I don't even know who you are. I'm not signing a buyer representation agreement. Fine, non-agency. If they say, okay, I'll sign something, but I only want you to show me 3 properties max. Okay, fine, 3 properties max, that's fine. At that particular instance, we have a form for it, and it's called a property showing residential representation agreement. I'm only going to show you that for that period of time. All right. So now, going back here to our code of ethics, let's see. Code of Ethics, Article 16. 16-4 talks about will not solicit a listing that is currently listed. However, when asked by the realtor and you refuse to disclose, the listing agent, if the listing agent, when asked by a realtor, refuses to disclose the expiration date or nature of the listing, then you can go directly to the client. This is your code of ethics. So if I call you up and I say, hey, when's your listing expire? You must tell me. Why? Because it's in here. You say, well, you can find that on the MLS. You're not allowed to. That's copyright law. If you read your MLS bylaws, nobody reads them, but if you read them, it says you can't do that. You have to call up the agent and say, hi, when's your listing expire? And if they don't tell you, and I would be very careful about this. I would put it in writing. I would do it in person. I would do it by text. I mean, I do all sorts of things before I went directly to the owner. It's in your code of ethics. It says you can do this. 6 tells you about conduct where a client or others regarding the exclusive use of the property type of service, not directly or indirectly. What did I tell you I do not do? Property management. So if I have a listing on this house over here, nothing stops you from knocking on the door. Hi, I'm with this real estate company. We know you're listed with Joel, but we do property management. If your listing doesn't sell, we'd be happy to property manage it for you. That's perfectly fine. It's legal and it's in your code of ethics. We come down here to 10. When acting as a buyer representative, is that what we're doing right now? Yes, we have a buyer representation, broker compensation agreement. At the first contact, you will disclose that. So, hi, buyer, you're gonna go out and look at properties. I know you're not supposed to go without me, and I know I'm supposed to be there, and but I know you're gonna be driving home from work. You're gonna get excited, see this open house, you're gonna stop there, and you're gonna say, oh, I love this house, I'd like to make an offer on it. And the guy that's sitting in the open house is gonna say, whoa, I can write that up. Now you put yourself in a problem. What I want you to do is I want you to have your vampire cards. The vampire card looks like this. It's your business card. You say, hi, take this with you, buyer. You walk into an open house, and when you get all excited and the agent says, hey, I got a deal coming on here, say, no, I'm working with Joel. I call them my vampire cards because you know buyers are going to do this. They want to buy property. 13, when dealing concerning properties exclusively listed with a buyer, the client's representative, and not with the client, except with consent of the client. In other words, if you have a question and you want to ask a question, you contact the agent first. If the agent won't tell you or doesn't get back in touch with you, now you can go and talk to the seller, but you better put it in writing, the substantive services. Don't go
Joel,
directly.
can we catch up on questions?
Yeah, but I got another meeting here at 4:00.
Oh, okay.
All right.
It's up to you.
Let me go ahead and get through this. If we still have time, I'll be happy to answer some questions. Otherwise, I have
Gotcha.
another Zoom I have to get to. Because this one ends at 4:00. It's only 2.5 hours that they get credit for. So any other time than that, have them call me, text me, email me. I'll be happy to answer their questions. All right. 15 says, in a cooperating transactions, compensation. Now, do we have to disclose what the compensation is? Yes. To the seller. Yes. To the buyer, when we have a buyer representation agreement, what our compensation is when the seller, but we can't put it on the MLS anymore. But there's nothing that stops you from calling up the listing agent. Hey, will your seller pay a commission? Yes or no. They could put it on a flyer. They could put it in, they could text it to you, email it to you. Nothing says other than they can't put it in the MLS. And you can't put any hints to the MLS saying, oh, we would like to have, call me and I'll tell you what the commission is. Can't put that in the MLS. 18 talks about shall not use information obtained from the listing broker through the cooperation made by the MLS services. Oh, wait a minute. I'm not allowed to use that? No, that's copyrighted information. This is 2002 without the listing broker's consent. The listing broker says, sure, you can use that information. You called the listing broker, you might as well get it from them. 19 goes on and say the notice of property for sale or lease. So now we got a sale or lease. And by the way, California is a tenant state now. If you take a lease for longer than a year, you must treat it as a sale. You say, what are you talking about, Joel? Here's what I'm talking about. If we go to the purchase agreement, the real estate purchase agreement, we go to the first page, it says agency disclosure. This is at the first thing, the RPA, the RLA, the BRBC, and it says right here, if checked, if you check off this box, this form is being provided in connection with a leasehold transaction exceeding 1 year. Under the civil code, you must treat it as a sale. You must do all the disclosures as if it was a sale. I'm just telling you, you can read there's the code right there. It's the little things that will put you out of this business, not the big things. And then 20, it says prior to their relationship, the current form, there is nothing that says you can't be approached by somebody else. So here's what happens. I've got this guy, I've been dealing with him for 30 years. He's always bought and sold through me. If I do not have a listing with him and I do not have a buyer's representation with him, another agent could approach him and say, hey, you want to buy and sell through me? There's nothing that I can put in the law in the state of California that says I can pre-list you. In fact, your listing agreements are limited to 24 months for a house and 90 days or 3 months for a buyer representation agreement. Okay, 2 years, 24 months for a listing, 3 months for a buyer representation agreement. That's state law. Okay, it's coming up. All right, last thing is this. This talks about if we're going to do arbitration. Well, we already talked about arbitration. You have a committee. They have the A1. You have a committee. If you're related by blood or marriage, you can't serve. We pick an odd number other than one, so that's probably three. We contact the complainant, we contact the respondent. Hi, you owe me money. I'm not paying you a dime. And we sit down and we listen to what goes on. Once they're all done. Anything else? You told me why. Remember, we had the procuring cause chart. Just make notes. Go to the website, CAR, put in procuring cause chart, and it'll come up with the chart. And you can see the 21 items in there that you have to do, actually 23 items that I, as a committee member, look at in order to make sure if you get paid or not, if you win the arbitration or not. And that's why I made it part of my policy and procedures manual, because I think it's important that you, as a real estate professional, be knowledgeable in the area in which you're dealing, especially how you get paid. Then we come on down here, it talks about when filing litigation or refusal withdraw makes it arbitration. If you file litigation and you refuse to mediate, you're going against what your board bylaws say. Now, when you join the association, you signed all these papers. Remember when you joined the association, Downey Association of Realtors? It said, hi, here's this paper, sign it. You went, you never even looked at them. In there it says, you're agreeing to this. You didn't look at it, you don't know. You need to read the stuff you sign. Now, I'm with you. I hate reading this stuff. I really do. But I know if I don't, I always get myself in trouble. So I read stuff all the time. You need to read this stuff. All right. Now, I told you that if you stuck around, I can take a few questions, and then I'm going to have to go to this other Zoom meeting. I'm going to put it on my phone here. You have a few questions I can answer? And then what I'm going to do is launch you. I'm going to put you on the top of SpaceX right out the door.
Okay. What if they refuse to sign anything and walk right into the open house and ignore you or give you incorrect information at the open house?
Oh, what? Will they give you incorrect information? Absolutely. At the open house right now, before this whole thing happened, I'd say, hi, tell me your name, and they give me this email address, Lucky Louie at AOL. We know that was false. If they refuse to give you any information, they're trespassing. You know, by law, your seller has something that says if you're not invited in, you're not covered. Well, if you're not invited in, you're trespassing. At that moment in time, you make a decision. Do you want to call the police or not? I'm going to tell you my position. I'm just going to watch them like a hawk, because I know the seller standing behind me saying, let him in, let him in. They think open houses sell houses. Open houses do not sell houses. Open houses get us buyers. But because we've done such a great sales job on them, they think that it gives them this ability.
Joel, if a member has door hangers printed for expired listings and forgot to add the disclosure, should they throw them away and reprint them, or can they use them?
The law says you're in violation of law if you put them out. So I don't know if you want to throw them away or not, but if you use them, you're in violation of real estate law and your code of ethics.
Is it legal to submit a compensation agreement with a purchase offer for compensation from seller?
Well, if you represent the buyer, yes, because you're not a party to the transaction. You're not a party to the transaction. You cannot put anything in there. The purchase agreement is between the seller and the buyer. That's why we use the seller pays buyer broker, SPBB. The buyer writes this up and gives it to the seller with the offer. My office policy is we don't write an offer without an SPBB. Why? Because I want to get paid. Well, what about compensations? What they call, what do they call them? Compensate, or not compensation, they call them when the seller pays their closing costs and things like that. Those are limited by law, by Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac guidelines. Your concessions are limited. You can only get a certain amount of concessions.
Can we still send the properties via email if they haven't signed a buyer agreement or a showing agreement?
Yeah, you can do anything you want. You're just in violation of the settlement procedure at NAR. That's all. Okay. So with that in mind, in the words of a famous real estate attorney, go out there and sell something.